Today, we are going to talk about a new concept called conditionals. And this is going to throw a monkey wrench in everything we know, because I've stressed all yesterday how the computer only processes things top-down, one line at a time. And we're now going to see that there are some exceptions to that rule. So when I run this file, nothing happens. Let's break this down line by line. On line 1, we create a variable called Rupert, and we make that 7. On line 2, we have a conditional. Basically, it's if this, then that. So if Rupert is greater than 10, then let's print Rupert, which is 7, to the terminal. And then we have this end thing. And I'll come back to that. So this, in English, is saying if Rupert is greater than 10, then let's print it to the terminal. Is Rupert greater than 10? It's not, it's 7. So the way the computer processes this is that it actually skips line 3. It skips over it. So we know that the computer could go top down, but I never told you that the computer could sometimes skip a line. This is the first time we're encountering something like that. So the computer processes it line 1. It says, okay, I got it in my head. Rupert is now the nickname for 7. That's our variable. Then it processes line 2, and it says if Rupert is greater than 10, it's not greater than 10, so the computer actually doesn't even read line 3. It skips over it. How does the computer know how far to skip? It looks for an end. Every if statement has to end with an end. That tells Ruby that our if statement, our conditional, is done. This, again, when we say that Ruby skips that line altogether, as you know, 10 divided by 0 should give us a non-division error, right? But we don't get an error. Why? Because Ruby skipped that line. It skipped it entirely. So that's the key thing to understand here. Okay, now if I switch this to if Rupert is less than 10, then print Rupert, then it does print it. In this case, Ruby ended up processing each of the 4 lines. It did line 1, it established our variable. Line 2 is Rupert less than 10, it is. So since that condition is true, Ruby moves on to line 3 and executes that line of code. And it prints Rupert to the terminal, and then we're done. Any question about this? This is the foundation for many coding concepts, but especially for something like artificial intelligence, right, where the computer has to make a decision based on various circumstances. If this circumstance is true, imagine we're making a self-driving car, right? If there is a truck ahead of us, we better slow down. If there's empty road ahead of us, then we can go up to the speed limit, right? That's the artificial intelligence is totally predicated upon conditionals. Yeah?
So the condition is if Rupert is less than 10. That's the condition.
Yeah, so when I refer to the condition, that's exactly right. It's is Rupert less than 10. That's the condition. If that condition is true, then we do whatever is between the if and the end. Yep. Okay. Let me pull up a slightly more complex example. Okay, so here we track a variable called Emily. Basically, what we're going to do here is well, let's run it, see what happens. We get to, let me eliminate the green things again. We get to, let's follow the logic here. Let's see, how does Ruby processing this? And I'm going to actually use the comments to help indicate which lines Ruby processes and which lines it skips. As follows. So line 1, Emily is 100. We're establishing a new variable called Emily. It's a nickname for 500. So Ruby processes that line. So to indicate that, I'm going to put that little pound sign at the end to say Ruby hit that line and executed that line. Cool? We move on. Line 3, Ruby processes that line because it has to check to see if that condition is true. If Emily is less than 100, Emily is not less than 100, so it skips line 4. So I'm not going to put a pound sign on line 4 because Ruby never hits it, processes it. So far, does this make sense? Okay. If Emily is greater than 5, so Ruby processes this line. I think I'm just going to add pound signs here too. There's not much to process on the blank lines, but to emphasize that line 4, there's a gap there, that means Ruby skipped it. Okay, if Emily is greater than 5, is Emily greater than 5? It is. So we process line 8, and we print 2 to the terminal, which is why we see the 2 over there. So so the computer hits that line. It processes line 9, which concludes that conditional. If Emily is less than 1,000, is Emily less than 1,000? It is, because Emily is 500. So it processes that line. That means we'll process the next line, line 12. And here we're overriding Emily. Right? Emily is no longer 500 going forward. Emily, henceforth, is 77. So we'll keep that in our heads. Or maybe I'll put it down. Emily is 77. Okay. We process line 14, which is blank. If Emily is greater than 100, we process that line. Do we process line 16? We do not. We skip over it because Emily is now 77, so it's not greater than 100 anymore. Whoops. So we skip over 16. On line 17, we conclude the conditional. Process line 18. If Emily is greater than 500, is Emily greater than 500? It is not. So we skip over line 20, which would have printed 3 to the terminal, which is why you don't see 3 in the terminal, because we skipped that line, and we're done. So Ruby processed everything one line at a time, top down. However, it skipped a few lines based on the conditions. Any questions about this example? Yeah?
Sorry, so if you do run that, it puts those numbers in a row?
If I run this,
Yeah.
it prints 2.
Why does it only?
Because the only line that I had that printed something with the P
Yeah.
that actually got hit was line 8. So I had a few other lines where I tried to print something. Line 4, I used the P to print something, and on line 20, I tried to print something with the P, but those lines get skipped. So the only line that has a P in it that actually got hit was line 8, which prints 2 to the terminal. Does that make sense? Yeah, good question.